Hello, everyone. Hi there. Hello. Big day for Elizabeth Holmes. Thank you for joining me. Hit that like button and put your question in the chat. You need to subscribe to participate in our chat. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Big day. 11 years. 11 years. Will she serve all of those 11 years? So thank you again for joining me. Hit that like button, share this video. So we're going to go over a lot of things tonight. We're going to talk about what happened at the sentencing. We're going to talk about restitution, the appeal, how the sentence was calculated. And I got a question for you. What do you think the defense's best argument was to have her sentence reduced? Because if you do it based on the calculation that the government suggested, the excess of 550 million in loss or 803 million, that puts her at the very top of the sentencing range. So what factor, what argument do you think the defense, and I did my calculation, saved Elizabeth Holmes 9 years? So hi there, I'm Michele Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and a former prosecutor, just in case you don't recognize me. I've been providing a lot of legal analysis on the Elizabeth Holmes trial, and I watched the Elizabeth Holmes trial. I was in the courtroom. I saw her testify. Was she remorseful when she testified? I didn't think so, and neither did the judge. And what did the judge say? The judge said, this is a fraud case where an exciting venture went forward only to be dashed with exuberance, hubris, and outright lies. I clued you guys in on the sentencing when I did that video, when I went over the judge's ruling on the denying Elizabeth Holmes the acquittal. And when a judge puts in writing that a defendant lies, that's not a good sign for sentencing. And that's exactly what the judge said here. Outright lies. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. I'm looking at all the comments here. Thank you for joining me, everyone. All right. So put your question in the chat. Hit that like button. I'm curious. What do you think the defense's best argument was? Or what do you think the government's best argument was to either increase or reduce her sentence? Okay. And those sentencing guidelines, if you go look at my past videos I did the last couple, I walked you through. She was looking at a potential based on loss, and we're going to talk about that, how that loss calculation was done. Based on the loss calculation presented by the government, $803 million. That puts her in the life category, but that wasn't what the judge calculated, okay? So I'll talk about that in a second. So anyway, this video is just my opinion. It's for education information. I want to know what your analysis is, so put it in the chat. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to quickly go over some of the factors that were argued during sentencing. We're going to talk about the calculation of loss. And we're also going to I've talked to you about one of the victims who spoke at the sentencing. And I'm going to get to your 5 pages of questions. So thank you very much. And they're great questions. All right. So let's go over the factors of what happened at the sentence hearing today. Number one of the big disputes was the number of victims. And the reason it mattered how many victims there were is because you get a 2-point step increase. That means it's an aggravating factor. If there's more victims impacted by your fraud, you will serve more time. So the defense was arguing, no, there wasn't 10 or more victims. The prosecution was saying, yes, there was. The judge said, yes, there was. So the judge did consider the number of victims in his calculation of sentence. Okay, next factor was whether or not this was considered a criminal enterprise. The reason that matters is because it's also an aggravating factor, which would increase Elizabeth Holmes' sentence. So the defense argued you need more people participating. The prosecution said, no, we showed that there were a lot of unknowing participants, the employees at Theranos, the media who was given all these press releases touting that the blood testing technology was fair, accurate, and reliable. You remember all that? Okay, then, so the judge did not, as far as I can, the judge did not penalize her on that criminal enterprise count. Okay, so the next one was whether or not, I have a ton of notes here. Okay, whether or not, and that would have been, had she been considered the ringleader or a leader of a criminal enterprise, that would have been a four-step increase, which would be significant time. Okay, the next factor that was considered was whether or not those acquitted patient counts. You remember how I talked about in the previous video where there is case law to support that a judge in sentencing can consider all the conduct. So what the defendant is convicted of, even the acquitted counts, anything that's related to this fraud, the judge can consider. Well, the judge did not take that factor into the calculation, and neither did probation. So the patient acquittal counts are not calculated as part of the sentence. Okay. So the next, and I think this was the last factor, was whether or not there was a risk of harm or death based on putting out this unreliable technology out to the public, because people were walking in to the Theranos, to the wellness centers at Walgreens, assuming the technology was working, right? They were going in to get their blood testing results, relying on that test results, as well as other doctors. And there were Aaron Tompkins, there were Brent Billings. He didn't testify because his blood report was discovered late, so that count was dismissed on the Holmes case, but not in Balwani's. But anyway, several victims or their doctors testified in the trial to say that they relied on the technology, or they noticed that the blood results were inaccurate. Okay, so did the judge consider that? Well, there was a lot of, I'm sure there was a lot of it's called the victim impact statements. That means they can make a written statement to the judge, submit it with the probation department. Probation submits it as part of the pre-sentence report, which, by the way, is confidential. So we don't know what those victim impact statements said, but we do know that there was one victim who stood up today, and that was Alex Schultz, whose father is George Schultz, and also the parent of whistleblower Tyler Schultz. So the testimony was explaining how, in their opinion, that Elizabeth Holmes took advantage of George Schultz. You see, because she stacked the board at Theranos of her blood testing company with people like George Schultz, General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, other military or politicians, people with big reputations, and she traded on that reputation, right, to attract other investors. So let me take a moment here and look at the questions here. I was following the live tweets, blah, blah, blah. What happened between the announcement of the sentence and the date of remand? I'll talk about that. How come she's not surrendering until April? And it's very interesting. And I'll give you my opinion as to why. Hang on, I'll get to that. She should have been remorseful. Yeah, no kidding. Had she been remorseful? And interesting, her statement. She stood up. She stood up to the judge in tears and said to the judge, and I quote, where's her name? Oh, I stand before you taking responsibility for Theranos. I love Theranos. It was my life's work. Well, what about the responsibility for the harm caused to the patients, to the public, to the investors? She said taking responsibility for Theranos. What about taking responsibility for your conduct? And what the defense argued was that she was accepting responsibility, but she's not admitting guilt. And the reason she's not admitting guilt is because she has a constitutional right. She's trying to protect her rights. Well, wording matters. And when you say things like taking responsibility for Theranos, as I've said in previous videos, CEOs every day take responsibility for the harm caused by defective products or, mistakes that are made. And she talked about, I loved Theranos. Well, what about everyone else? It's not I. What about everyone else? I love Theranos. It was my life's work. Well, she's working, according to the prosecution, she's working on yet another patent regarding chemistry in the healthcare field. So is this sentence going to deter Elizabeth Holmes? Will it deter anyone in Silicon Valley or any future fraudster out there? As I said, when the jury came back, fraud is no joke. And one count of fraud is up to 20 years, right? She got 11. And she also is not surrendering until April. So we'll talk about that in a second too. So let me see what your questions. Will she appeal? Pictor, yes, of course she's going to appeal. They're fighting this, right? And like every defendant, she has a right to appeal. Were the rulings made that were incorrect by the judge? Was a sentence miscalculated like it was, according to the Supreme Court in the Jeffrey Schilling case, in the Enron case, where he was initially sentenced to 24 years. And this is what the defense argued in Elizabeth Holmes' sentencing memo, is that she is getting more time, they claim, she's getting more time than Jeff Schilling from Enron, the CEO of Enron. Well, he was initially sentenced to 24 years, but because it went to the Supreme Court, it was partially overturned, the conviction, and it was also sent back to have the defendant resentenced. And part of that resentencing was there was a deal made with the government that Jeff Schilling would get 14 years. Okay, so that was an agreement between the government and the defense. So Elizabeth Holmes here got 11 years. Jeff Schilling got 14. He served 12 years in prison. Okay, and so I know several of you have asked, is Elizabeth Holmes going to serve all of the 11 years and 3 months? Well, in the federal system, if I'm correct about this, I think she serves, I think it's close to 85% of her sentence. And again, that depends on credits that may be given or not given to Elizabeth Holmes. Okay, so did she use her voice? I don't know. Outright lies, bang on, is true. Let's see. She will appeal, and remorse would be an admission. No, actually, people appeal all the time. Admission of any sort is a bad form in an appeal. Yeah. Well, it depends on how you say, what words you use, right? What's going to prevent her from fleeing the country? Yeah, I got that question all the time. Usually they submit their passport. She's not going anywhere. And I know a lot of you are suspicious. I get it. I'm actually more shocked by the order to pay $100 million in the prison sentence. I don't know that it's been an order to pay $100 million. Do we know if any restitution is being paid to the investors? Usually what happens, it's a restitution hearing, so they calculate the loss. I don't know. We'll have to see when the judge issues his order as to what it is. Is it typical in a case? Hi, Robert. Is it typical in a case to have such as this to have 6 months prior? Good question. So Robert asked if it's typical in a case such as this to have 6 months prior to self-surrender. Well, what do you think? She didn't get remanded immediately. You see it on, I think it was Sammy who made this comment, that you see it all. He said he probably watches too much TV because he sees people get sentenced in handcuffs. And believe me, I witnessed it all the time in my career, okay? But in federal court, the Bureau of Prisons determines which location with the recommendation from the judge as well, but which prison she would go to. And what's in particular to Elizabeth Holmes, and the reason, in my opinion, that she's being allowed to stay out until April of 2023. It's actually April 27th when she's going to surrender at some prison somewhere, is because she's pregnant. And I think this judge is being very compassionate, and or he's saving the taxpayer dollars, because pregnant women, when they are sentenced, go to what's called a MINT facility. It's mothers and infants together. And they're allowed to 2 months prior to giving birth to stay in that facility. right? So they're taken out of the prison. They're sent to this mint facility where they're allowed to stay there for 2 months. And then they go to its parenting facility where they're allowed to stay with the newborn for up to 4 months to provide bonding. So instead of the taxpayer, you could think of this as the taxpayer spending that bill, giving her time to bond with her child, she's allowed to bond with her child out of custody. Now, again, I don't know what other factors the judge is considering. I don't know if there were letters by therapists or counselors or anybody, maybe it was medical doctors regarding her pregnancy or mental health status. I don't know about any of that because all of that is confidential. And I don't know if that was a consideration the judge made. But I think the judge is being very compassionate here, allowing her to stay out until the baby is born. And I think the baby will be 4 or 5 months at that point. Then she goes straight to prison to serve her sentence. Okay. What are your thoughts about her sentence? I think the sentence is very reasonable. I really do. And I think the other thing is that, it's the calculation of loss that pretty much put us in that range. Okay. And I'll talk to you about that in a second because the prosecution said the loss was in excess of 550 million, right? And that amount of loss, if you look at the videos I've done where I walk you through in the video I did inviting you to this live stream, was if you look at the amount of loss that takes you farther down and exposes you to more prison. Well, the argument that the defense made was a very good one. And that was, guess which argument? Did anybody get it? The argument was, okay, follow me on this. For those of you taking notes, get your pen and pencil ready. You ready? So the judge found at sentencing that the loss was 384 million. 384 million. Not the 803 million that the prosecution is claiming. And again, they may be arguing that applies to restitution. I don't know yet. But just based on calculation, government says 803 million. The judge found 384 million. So how did the judge get to 384 million? Well, the defense argued, and this was a good one, that it was that there was still residual, I'll call it residual value left in Theranos at the time at which the Wall Street Journal article came out, where blowing the whistle, right? So both sides, both the prosecution and the defense, got a valuation expert to determine what the fair market value was of Theranos at the time at which the frauds were occurring. Okay. And the determination made by the government's valuation expert was somewhere in the range of 237 million to 273 million. So if you take the 384 million that the judge found minus the fair market value of Theranos at the time the frauds were occurring, that leaves you with, if I did my math right, 111 to 147 million in the amount of loss. Okay? So it was 384 million the judge found minus the fair market value, or the substantial value that the defense was arguing in their sentencing memo, which you can go ahead and look at the plea for leniency video I did where I walk you through the defense's sentencing memo, or you can look at the 15 years prison video I did where I walk you through the government's sentencing memo, okay? So it's 384 minus 237 to 273. That comes up with 111 million to 147 million. Then you go down the range and you look to see, okay, what step increases that? So that increases the step to level 24. So if you take 24 plus 7, which is what you get on a fraud count, that's level 31, which is what probation recommended, which is that 108 months, okay? But then the judge gave, in the calculation, aggravating factors, the number of victims, the harm caused. He increased it by a step of 2. So that's how we got level 33, which is how we got 135 months or 11 years, 3 months prison. Okay, everybody following? All right, this is so sad for the child. Well, the children, she's got 2 kids. Is her husband on the hook for restitution? I don't think so. I'm sure she and the prosecution said this in their sentencing memo, something, and I'm paraphrasing, to the effect that Elizabeth Holmes has been very careful to basically shield her family from any exposure. And that's, normally if you were working with your defendant, and they were facing significant amount of restitution and stuff, you want to keep things separate so family members don't get pulled in on having to pay restitution. Okay, it's just my opinion here. Okay, why would she need to bond with her child if she's not going to be with her child for 10 years? Well, because that's what the federal sentencing and Bureau of Prisons have determined, that there's a period of, and I'm sure legislature as well, there's a period of time at which pregnant women are entitled to be bonding with their child. So whether she spends it in one of these mint mothers and infants together facilities, or whether she spends it out of custody, it's a determination that the judge made, and the judge decided out of custody, and then she goes into prison starting in April. Okay. Tyler didn't testify. This is Matthew Basketball. Tyler didn't testify, neither did his father, yet his father was to speak about how Elizabeth wrecked their families. Can you explain how this works? I'm sure Tyler and Erica Rosendorf, a ton of people submitted victim impact statements. All the patients, anybody impacted by Theranos, I'm sure they submitted victim impact statements, which I'm sure he indicated he read. So I think Alex Schultz was probably designated as a family representative. So that's probably why he spoke. Were investors' losses taken into consideration? Yeah, they were. This is LA. Were investor losses taken into consideration? Yeah, that's what brought the amount of loss down, because both sides got an expert to value the fair market value of Theranos at the time at which these investors were engaged, were investing in Theranos at the time of the fraud. So that adjustment saved Elizabeth Holmes 9 years. That was a good argument made by the defense. And I think any defense attorney would be making that argument. Okay, do you think Sunny Balwani will get the same time? Oh, you know what, Lynn? I think we already know what Sunny Balwani is going to get. And you know why I think I know that? Because if you read if you look at the video I did, or you read the sentencing memorandum by the government, they use plurals. Another word, I'm trying to think how they said it. I think they said investors, the sentencing. Anyway, if you read through it, what I gathered, it's the same calculation for Sunny Balwani. It's going to be the same sentencing calculation. I mean, they could usually with multiple convictions in the federal system, they give incremental. They don't necessarily do consecutive 20 years, 20 years, 20 years, because Balwani was convicted on all 12 counts. So I think there's probably going to be some increase, maybe something more than 11 years. But again, it boils down to the judge's discretion here, because those guidelines, that range is just advisory. It's not mandatory. Okay. So I think Balwani is probably looking at somewhere 11 years. I mean, it's somebody who's the one that mentioned that he's probably not resting easy tonight. He's probably not. And I'm sure his attorneys are talking to him about this, 11 plus years. And by the way, I think Balwani's going to prison first, right? He's not going to get that out of time custody. He's probably going to be surrendering a lot sooner, probably January, right? If it's December 7th, or maybe the judge takes him. So maybe he surrenders. I don't know what kind of logistics they have worked out. Oh, and the other thing about why maybe Elizabeth Holmes is not surrendering immediately could be maybe there's no place in the system. Maybe they don't have any more room for pregnant women. I don't know. So maybe it's no room for pregnant women. Maybe it's the judge being compassionate. Maybe it's allowing time for her to bond with her child. Maybe they're saving the taxpayer dollars by not, putting her in one of those 2 facilities and then going back into the prison. I don't know. Just a guess here. Maybe we'll find that out. All right. If she was honest, she wouldn't be going to prison, Stargazer says. I think having watched her testify for those 7 days, I just kept thinking, she's just not going to admit to it. She's just not going to take responsibility. She's not going to show remorse. She's not going to show she appreciates the gravity. And that is so critical for a defendant to tell the judge, to show the judge that they get it, that they understand what they did, right? She doesn't have to say that I knew it was unreliable. I put it out there anyway. She could say, I made mistakes. I do take responsibility. I didn't, she could say, the buck stops with me. There are many ways that she could have expressed her remorse. She could have said, whatever happened, I take responsibility for that. I'm sorry for the harm that was caused. I'm sorry. That's not admitting guilt. That's admitting responsibility for whatever happened. Okay. There's a difference. All right. So, people may disagree with me on this, and, props to you if you do. That's fine. Okay. But I want people to think about this and analyze this case, critically analyze. And, Elizabeth Holmes isn't the biggest fraud out there, by the way. What the heck's been going on? Okay. So, I think a lot of you know what I'm getting to. Okay. You can go ahead and look at the video I did on the depositions of the government officials coming up. Take a look at that. Okay. Take a look at what's going on, potentially going on there, and the responsibilities, that we hold our government officials to. Okay. So enough of my talk, getting a little off topic here. Does anyone know if she's required to wear an ankle monitor? I don't think so. Interesting question, Line Screw. Line Screw, I think you keep thinking that she's going to get on a jet and get out of here. I don't think that's going to happen. They know, they know she's facing 11 years. Do you think they're not going to be paying attention? So you're doing a great job. Thank you very much. Do you think Sunny will show remorse at his sentencing? Matthew Basketball asks. Good question. I doubt it. What do you think? I doubt it. Although let's see what words he uses. Okay. Marcus says, will she be allowed to be free during appeal? Great question. Several of you have asked that one. Can she stay out pending appeal? No, I doubt it. Not usually when defendants are sentenced to significant prison time, and 11 years is significant, they're in custody awaiting the outcome of their appeal. Okay. And I'm going to get to the appeal questions in a second. Will she be allowed? Okay. Lynn says she never got it. Yeah, you're right. She doesn't get it. She doesn't get it. I think it was demonstrated when I watched her testify for 7 days. She doesn't get it by the statement that she's made to the judge. I mean, do people get a free pass because their dream didn't work out? I mean, it's kind of like, what reality is she living in? I get it. It's a great idea. And according to the statements I read from several of the 130 letters in support of Elizabeth Holmes, there seems to be a lot of people around her who also don't seem to get it, or they don't want to. I kept reading letter after letter about saying, Your Honor, I'm not really aware of what happened in the trial, or I haven't kept up with the trial, but I think she's an honest person. I mean, I don't know how you can say that. I mean, aren't you supposed to look at the complete picture of a person? I don't know. Maybe I live in a different reality. If she admits guilt or remorse, is it difficult to appeal and found innocent? Fabrizio asked that. Well, she doesn't have to admit guilt. She can say, take responsibility for whatever happened. You can still appeal. The appeal comes down to the trial record. What happens to the appellate court doesn't call new witnesses. usually doesn't look at new evidence. And again, all those underlying motions for an acquittal, right? Where she said Rosendorf showed up at her house, basically was recanting his testimony. The judge found that wasn't new evidence and not, didn't justify an acquittal. And you can look at the videos I did on explaining that. But there's many ways in which a defendant can express their awareness of what happened, the gravity of the offense, without saying I'm guilty or not guilty, okay? So, and again, the appeal is based on, these big transcripts, which are of all the testimony, because when an appellate court reviews the trial record. That means the transcript, okay, of all the exhibits that were entered, all the testimony of Rosendorf, of Erica Chung, of Gangakar, of all the, what was the accountant's name? I forgot. And Spivey, of all of those, Brian Grossman, Lisa Peterson. Speaking of Lisa Peterson, at the sentencing, the defense brought up about objecting to Lisa Peterson's testimony. So I'm like, wait a minute, what's that about? Is that going to be an issue of appeal, right? Are they going to be arguing, as I said in the last, I think it was the last video or two videos before, when you have a witness on the stand saying that they relied on statements made by Elizabeth Holmes, like Lisa Peterson, who was a representative for the RDV, the DeVos family, that was the lion's share of this loss because they invested $99 million, almost $100 million. So when you have Lisa Peterson on the stand, you want to figure out what else she was relying on other than Elizabeth Holmes' statement. So I don't know if that's going to be a ground for an appeal. I don't know. We're going to see. But again, the appellate court just looks at the transcript, the record of the trial. They look to see, did the judge make the wrong decision on whether or not this evidence comes in or not? Or maybe the judge calculated the sentence wrong, like the judge did in the Enron Jeff Schilling case. I don't think it is going to happen here, But then the appellate court also looks at the briefs, the arguments that are submitted by both the prosecution and the defense. The defense is going to file their opening brief explaining what issues they're going to be, disputing for appeal. The government's going to be responding to that. And at some point, the appellate court could ask for oral argument. They don't have to. But if they grant oral argument, then the prosecution and the prosecution and the defense shows up and argues, okay? In addition to the briefs or the written arguments they've submitted, right? And they point out to the appellate court why they should uphold the conviction or why they should overrule or remand it, right? So that's the next step, okay? And appeals are for a defendant, appeals are very difficult to win, very difficult. It's like less than 10%, okay? But, they're working hard on this case, okay? So, and as I said, every defendant, including Elizabeth Holmes, has a right to an appeal, okay? Did the judge make the right calling on the evidence? Was, some of the preliminary rulings, were those correct? Was the sentencing calculated properly? Okay. Her only dream was to be a billionaire. That's it. That's interesting. Okay, let's see. Alex Schultz's statement was very poignant. Wow. Who was the cancer patient and what was the letter about? Yeah. I have to look into that one. Has Billy made a statement? No, I'm not aware of any other statements. Yeah, the patients, the patient counts that were Elizabeth Holmes was acquitted on. There was one where there was the false PSA test, the prostate cancer test. I think that was Merrill Ellsworth in Arizona, and his doctor testified that was a false prostate cancer test. There was a false miscarriage test, and I think that was Erin Tompkins, and her PA or her doctor testified to that as well. So you could see the impact. The evidence was there in as regarding the patient counts, but the jury decided that they acquitted. And sometimes what happens, having tried a lot of trials, sometimes what a jury does is they kind of, they pick, I don't know if I can say, that they just decided, they were going to compromise maybe. I don't know. We don't know because we're not entitled to know what their reasons were for deliberation, unless, of course, somewhere down the line there's some juror misconduct allegation. Okay. So we'll see about that. All right. So why wouldn't Elizabeth Holmes' attorney advise her to show more remorse? Well, sometimes we can tell our clients, we can give them advice. This is Matthew basketball question. We can give our clients advice, right? But they're the ones who make the decisions. And sure, it's not easy. I don't know what the defense is thinking. Maybe they agree with her, maybe they don't. I don't know. They're there to defend her rights. They're there to do the best job they can for her. And an 11-year sentence is a very fair sentence, in my opinion, for Elizabeth Holmes. Okay, so any ideas? All right, so let me get to some other points here. The defense made an argument about, and they kept making it through the trial and in their sentencing motion. Elizabeth Holmes didn't make a penny. She didn't sell her stock. I get that argument, but the thing is she was taking home a significant salary. Okay, and we don't know down to the penny where all the money was used, but I'm sure there were a lot of expenses that Theranos paid for. So, I understand why they're saying she didn't take a penny, but the other thing is you don't have to monetarily profit in order to find someone guilty of fraud. They don't have to profit. So in other words, you can have someone who lies, who takes your money, but doesn't really show a profit, therefore they didn't commit a fraud. No, that's not how it works. The government doesn't have to show that she made a penny. And the other thing is, I've said this many times in the videos, she owned the majority shares of this company, a private company, not a public, private company. Why would she be selling her shares? She would lose her ability to control the company. So, there's certainly arguments that can be made of why, if you believe that she didn't take a single penny. Okay. And then the defense also brought up that this was a stiff sentence that, she was looking at. They said that there are cases with yachts and the mansions and the parties bought with the proceeds of the financial gain. Yachts, mansions. Well, frankly, I'm probably lived under a rock. I didn't even know who Elizabeth Theranos was until I got involved in this case. Okay. So I think she had quite the lifestyle as it was portrayed. So I think it's, I don't know if you want to be saying mansions. Where was she living? Okay. So, and where is she living? I don't know about that statement, but anyway, okay, then let me get to the rest of let me get to your questions here. Let me look at the chat here. I keep getting asked who's paying her legal bills. Well, we don't know. And do you have a right to know? Our attorney-client fee agreements, the agreements that we work out, and our attorney-client agreements are confidential. And that's because the attorney-client relationship is confidential. Okay? There's a reason for that. There's a reason that the attorney-client relationship is confidential. Our clients have to be able to tell us what is going on, what's happened, etc., so that we can mount the best defense for them possible. And as to whether all this speculation that I see out there about who's funding her legal bills, we don't know that. And I do know that in the government sentencing memo, they do say that her legal fees are in excess of $30 million. Well, I don't know what the 30 million is. Is it from defending her SEC settlement? Is it because of the other settlements and other cases? I don't know what the 30 million's from. So anyway, that's my thought on that. She gained fame. Well, now she's got infamy, right? She was living in the most expensive area in all of the Bay Area. Yep. Why do you think her attorneys are advising her now post sentencing? Oh, what Matthew Basketball asked, what do I think they're advising her now? Probably telling her to keep a very low profile, right? Don't be talking to Rosendorf if he shows up again, or anybody, right? Just focus on taking care of your children and your pregnancy and getting prepared to go to prison. So, and also, as I've said, she's a quarterback. Somebody who runs a $1 billion company as the CEO, she's going to be quarterbacking the defense. She's going to be working, and has been, I'm sure, intimately working. This is not a stupid woman at all, by any means. I wouldn't be surprised if she goes into prison and writes a book, several books that'll probably be bestsellers. And the books will probably be something about how to defend yourself. Maybe it's why I got the wrong sentence, playing the victim card that she seems to be playing. And again, maybe she is the victim, I'll give her that. Maybe there's information we don't know about, right? We don't know if there were letters submitted by domestic violence experts, rape experts that said, that she didn't have the ability to have good judgment. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that I believe it. I'm just saying, think about all these possibilities. And that's what we do as lawyers. We think of all possibilities. We don't just come to one conclusion and then build our case around it. No, it's not done that way. The way I practice, I follow the evidence wherever it leads. Okay? So, Lynn says, I think the judge handled the case very well as well. Do you think he was swayed either way from the court proceedings today, or was his sentence pre-decided? Okay, first of all, this judge, and I sat there through the trial and watched him, he's a good judge, in my opinion. Okay, I've appeared in many jurisdictions in front of many different judges. This is a federal district judge. What did he do before he became a judge on the federal bench? He was a public defender. Right? Just like when I started, I was a baby prosecutor. He was a baby public defender. We was taking cases day after day. We took back-to-back trials, right? Starting our careers, where he defended, people accused of all sorts of crimes, right? I was prosecuting domestic violence, child abuse, drunk driving, drug cases, all sorts of cases, right? He's been in the shoes, right? And so he becomes a public defender. Then he goes and opens up, and if my research is correct, he opens up a private criminal defense practice. That means he takes on private clients who are charged with crimes. So he has stood in the shoes of defense attorneys. He's dealt with prosecutors, I'm sure, just like me, or defense attorneys like me, right? So, and he's also been on the bench I think he was a Superior Court judge as well, right? Then he makes his way, he earns his way to the federal bench. And if you look at the sentencing, other cases that he sentenced fraudsters on, and if you look at my very first video, Calculating Elizabeth Holmes, I showed you the several cases that he recently sentenced. Therefore, I came up with my conclusion of I thought she was going to get somewhere in the range of 8 years. And that was with the deduction and not knowing some of these things. I was close enough. But so, when you look at the government sentencing memo, they also show you the several different sentences that other judges have imposed. And the median was 180 months, which is what the prosecution was recommending, right? But this judge, in his discretion, decided, based on that loss calculation, actually that residual or substantial value of Theranos that remained, That's what was subtracted from that huge 800 million loss, right? Which is what put her in that lower category. Okay. The profits from any income will go to restitution. Well, we'll have to see what happens on that. Can she profit from selling a book while in prison? Great question. Well, depends on what the terms of, if there's a term against it in sentencing. We'll see. Such great information work. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I've worked hard on these. I try to keep you guys, that's why I chose this long form called YouTube, where I can talk to you and have these live streams and putting out these videos where I actually show you the exact exhibits that are entered into evidence and let you guys make your own analysis. I'm not trying to tell you how to think or how to evaluate. I want you to do that. And I hope I've been helpful in explaining the process and trying to be your guide on how to kind of look at these things. I mean, because most people don't get charged with crimes, right? Most people don't have to deal with the federal sentencing guidelines. So I think it's based on the overwhelming thank yous that I have received. Thank you to all of you too for subscribing and supporting my channel, and it's continuing to grow. But the outpouring of thank yous that I have received for the last 9 months since I started this YouTube channel have been great. You guys have been great to me. I mean, you've kept me on my toes. When I use legal terms, you tell me, what does that mean? So I've done my best to kind of really explain this to all of you. Okay. So thank you. Thank you, really a lot for your questions and for supporting this channel. Okay. I actually think her attorneys did a good job with what they had to work with. What do you think? Matthew Basketball. I can't answer that question. I don't know. I have to think about how I can present this to you. I don't want them getting, I'm just trying to, I know there are other legal analysts out there who are, saying things about the defense or what the prosecution did or didn't do right or wrong, or, some comments, that I've seen on YouTube. I'm not going to go there. Okay. It's a hard job defending and it's a hard job prosecuting. I think at some point I may put out a video on, there were certainly some areas on both sides that I saw. So, I hope that's okay. I hope that's a good enough response. Do I have a P.O. box? Yes, I have a P.O. box. You've been helpful. Thank you. All right, let me get to the rest of your questions here. All right. Rob G said, thank you so much for your detailed coverage. Thank you, Rob. Much of the media coverage seems to leave room for misunderstandings. Yeah, well, that's what I've been trying to do here. Because, these reporters and journalists, they didn't go to law school. They don't understand a lot of this stuff. And, that's kind of why I jumped in. That is why I jumped in. Clearly I'm not doing this for my ego to get my face out there. You're not seeing me on evening news tonight because I have other things I've got to do. Okay. So that's why I did this live stream, and I want to talk to you guys who are, have been following this since day one with me. So, okay. So, Rock said he thought she'd get a minimum of 12 years. And by the way, hats off. Where are my notes on the poll? Because 44% of you, where did I put that? Here it is. Okay. Hats off to those of you who voted in our poll, and thank you for voting. 44% of you thought that she would get 9 to 11 years. Good job. 28% of you thought she would get less than 9 years or home detention. And I'm curious as to why almost a third of you, 28% of you, thought that she would get less than 9 years or even home detention. I don't get it. What evidence do you have to support that? How's that? 15% of you said 15 years or more. 13% said 12 to 14 years. So you guys were pretty darn close. Okay. Let me see what other questions. Anything you would have done differently if I had had a client? Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. I'm not going to expound upon that here. With all due respect, the defense is putting on the best case they can. And, they're putting on their best case, okay? And she only got convicted on 4 counts. She got acquitted on the patient counts. So you decide whether or not you think they did a good job. Would I have done things differently? Well, I do things differently. Okay, is the 3.5 years of supervised release in addition? Yes, Marcus, great question. She gets 3 years supervised release, okay, after she comes out of prison. So that means they keep an eye on her for 3 additional years, and there's going to be terms and condition of her release. And if she violates any of those, she could be up for additional prison time. And there will be, usually what happens is the probation officer will generate reports and let the court know if there's anything, if there's any violations, and then the court, the judge, this judge, will determine whether she gets any additional time. All right, so supervised release is just like, it would be similar, I hope I kind of explain it, similar to, it's having a probation officer keeping track of you, right? So you have to comply whatever conditions that are imposed on her when she's released. I saw, okay. I don't know about I don't look at other websites. I thought our attorneys did much better job than Balwani's. Lynn B said, did Balwani's attorneys do a good job? I think her legal leadership was a train wreck. Yeah, well, I enjoy reading all of your opinions. I think Sunny's going to get slammed, Matthew Basketball. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know that he'll get slammed as much as you think, Matthew Basketball. Because again, it's an incremental increase based on the additional counts if this judge sentences it. And the other thing you got to consider is this is also a conspiracy case, right? Elizabeth Holmes was convicted of 1 count of conspiring to defraud investors with Balwani. Balwani was convicted on both of those conspiracy counts, right? Conspiring with Balwani to defraud investors, conspiring with Balwani to defraud, with Holmes to defraud investors, conspiring with Holmes to defraud patients. It's a conspiracy charge. So they're both co-conspirators. So could an argument be made, just putting it out there, could an argument be made that if Balwani's convicted of conspiracy and Elizabeth Holmes got 11 years, then why is Balwani getting more time? I don't know. We'll have to see, because each defendant can present different aggravating and mitigating factors. And I don't know what's in the pre-sentence report for Holmes or for Balwani, but my best guess is the sentence calculation is probably the similar, or if not the same, the sentence calculation, not the sentence recommendation, the sentence calculation, the range on the sentencing guidelines. I bet you it's pretty close for Balwani as well. We'll have to see. All right. Okay. So, what are the other questions? What is the biggest takeaway? Oh, what's the biggest takeaway? Yeah, that's good. Corke asks, what's the biggest takeaway from the Elizabeth Holmes story? You can have a dream, but you can't fraud your way to accomplish it. You can make representations, but they better be accurate, right? And if you're having people rely on what you say, it needs to be accurate, because otherwise you could be prosecuted for fraud or for defamation, right? All of those kind of things. The other takeaway is that, money, when people are looking at making profit, greed that surrounds us now about the amount of money that people are making, and even if they put out products that don't work, is that part of the business model? Where are people's morals and ethics? And by the way, the judge said here, which I thought was very poignant, he said, we know the technology didn't work. That's what the judge said. He also said, was there a loss of a moral compass here? Was there a loss of moral compass here? That's what the judge said. he was saying, you have to think about what was her motivation here. And I take it back to, and again, this is my opinion, and I could be ridiculously speculating here, but I have worked with a lot of victims of domestic violence and child abuse and molest, even today. And the devastation that does, and I'm not saying it did or didn't happen to Elizabeth Holmes. They say she was raped in college. They say that she was in a domestic violence, and many letters in her support say that as well, that she was in a domestic violence relationship with Balwani. They allege that. They say that she was controlled and influenced. But I can tell you this, that those kind of crimes, rape, abuse, molest, devastate people. And the other thing that we know, and here I'll point out two other things to you, is that when she was in high school, when she was a senior in high school, is when her father lost all of the money and savings because he was working at Enron, right? And we all know what happened in Enron. It was the biggest accounting scandal. Billions of money was lost, including her father's saving and his job and his income, when she was a senior in high school. Then she starts her freshman year at Stanford. And again, I'm guessing here. She starts her semester freshman year at Stanford. And there's a letter, and I can't remember who wrote it, by one of the letters in support, by one of the guys that she went to Stanford with, who said that when that they played a prank, it wasn't him, but somebody played a prank on Elizabeth, and they took her bicycle and they hit it when she was a freshman at Stanford. And according to that letter, Elizabeth didn't see it as a prank, got really upset. Okay, so think about this. Your family has just been devastated by the whole Enron scandal, lost all of their savings, and I don't know what her father's position was at Enron. So she then starts a career. She goes to Stanford, loses a possession of hers, freaks out. I'm paraphrasing this letter, but I thought it was very interesting, okay? So then she starts a company where she has a dream and convinces her parents, apparently, to let her drop out of Stanford after she has been raped, which is a whole nother thing. Like, has she had any counseling? Has she, what kind of healing? Rape is devastating. That's why it's used in war. It's a war crime. So if she's, I know they say she's gotten certified, she's a rape counselor, but my question is, what kind of healing and work has she done to repair the devastation of a rape? Okay. So I look at this a little differently, right? Given my background on what cases I've worked on in the working with that kind of a population, prosecuting those kind of cases, you see a lot about mankind, okay? And people are very complex. And so here is Elizabeth Holmes, where her family lost everything. She comes up with a dream. And if you read the letter from her father, she helps her father out through this when he lost everything. She comes up with a dream, convinces her parents to let her drop out of Stanford after this rape. Well, the reason for dropping out of Stanford, what was that about? Okay. But she has this dream. And so then she packs her board with all of these dignitaries, right? From George Shultz to Mad Dog Mattis to Sam Nunn to a bunch of other people who sit on her board. She convinces them that she's got this great idea. And even the judge said that what else did the judge say? This case is so troubling on so many levels. There's no question that Miss Holmes is bright. And I have no doubt that she's going to build another empire. I just hope that she has learned that there are boundaries, there are morals, there are ethics, and there are laws that we all have to abide by. Okay? So, just my opinion again. Okay, so let's see. What types of factors can reduce the actual time served in federal sentence? Well, that's up to the Bureau of Prisons and her probation officer. What if they do good work and, she may be counseling other rape victims in jail. I don't know. What is the substance abuse 500 can take a year off? Yeah, there is a drug abuse program that can give you some kind of credit. I'm not aware that she has any substance abuse issues. Why didn't they go after Elizabeth Holmes for contributing? Yeah, I don't know about that one either. My other question is, there were a lot of people involved. I'll leave it at that. Allegedly involved. The unknowing participants, they weren't charged. Abuse like this is never acceptable, but I don't believe anything that come out of her. Yes, targets. Okay, so Lynn says she could be 50 years old. I think she's 38 or 39. So, yeah, that's pretty close to 50. That's if she serves all 11. I don't think she'll serve all 11. She may serve, 20 or 30% less of that. So maybe 8 or 9 years. I don't know. We'll have to see. Jackie C says, I think the patent she's working on is based on the work of the people that worked for her. Yeah, maybe. I mean, she has a ton of patents. And I think she's going to prove to the world that she's not a failure. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what she's had to prove her whole life. I don't know. I don't know the psychology. I've never met her. I don't know. But I do know that she has a lot of loving support around her, which is the reason why, probation recommended 9 years, because of the significant family support she has, because of the trauma, and because of the collateral punishment. That means all the media attention, all the scorn that she is facing. Those were 3 of the factors that the probation that was indicated in the government's sentencing memo. Those are 3 of the factors that probation relied on to give her a 9-year sentence, not a 15, to recommend a 9-year sentence, not a 15-year recommendation by the government. Okay. So, Yatsu says, wow, I can't believe this is happening. Sasha Moore said she needs more than 20 years. Many of you said that. Manchita said the judge is going easy on her. Anything under 20 years. I don't think the judge went easy on her, but that's my opinion. Catherine Lagrama said, how did they come up with 44 to 48 million in losses? Well, I don't know, because a lot of the defense's memo is redacted, and I don't know. I don't have the letter from their business valuation expert to tell us what the fair market value was of Theranos. I mean, we can do the math. If it was 348 or 384 million that the judge came up with, minus 44 million, so they're saying their valuation was probably 270, 280. I don't know. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Pictor asked the judge, does the judge adjust his sentence at sentencing by what he heard in the court today? Yeah, judges are free to do that. If Elizabeth Holmes stood up and said, I'm sorry, I didn't express my remorse earlier, but let me give you the 10 reasons why I'm extremely remorseful, and I take full responsibility for all the harm that could have been caused by all, I don't know. Had that been said, maybe it would have been a little different for Elizabeth Holmes. I don't know, though. Okay. This judge is a no-nonsense judge. He's had a lot of experience sentencing fraudsters. He's heard a lot of trials. He's tried a bunch of cases. They give, his career, as I said earlier, he started out as a public defender. Okay. When I was a baby prosecutor, I always heard people say, I don't want a public defender. They're crummy lawyers. let me tell you, some of the best lawyers out there are public defenders because they do it day in, day out. They know the evidence code back and forth, right? And so many clients that I work with have no clue about the evidence code. They don't even know it. And they're supposed to be getting evidence in. They don't know how to do an opening statement. They don't know what an objection is, because you have to understand, we weren't taught. Most of us were not, especially my age, we were not taught how to do trials in law school. And most lawyers, less than 10% of lawyers become trial attorneys. Very few. So, there are trial skills, and I taught through many of them across the United States. They have trial skills during the summer where the law students may do a week or two where they they prepare a civil case and a criminal case, and they fly me in to help, do the training and explain, just like I've been doing with you guys. Okay, so anyway, let's see what other questions we got. So, Pictor also said that Sunny's probably extremely uncomfortable tonight. Yeah, that's probably true. David Anderton said, what about restitution? Will it be levied after? So restitution, the court may have a hearing or may have already made the determination on what the amount is and who gets what. She may not have to pay that until the appeal is final, right? Because the conviction is not final until the appeal is final, until the conviction is upheld. Okay, so appeals may be a year to 2 years down the road before we find out whether or not this conviction stands and this sentence stands. Okay, Kay Shaw said, what will be the amount of restitution? I don't know. We'll have to find that out. Sasha Moore said, why isn't she led straight to jail like the rest of us? And I'm sure many people, federal system's a little different than state court. Okay, city and county state court. You like your superior courts. I've seen many clients, many defendants handcuffed and taken away immediately. But in federal court, the Bureau of Prison has to figure out the logistics of where they put prisoners. There's approximately 157,000 prisoners in the federal system. 7% are women. Okay. Kay Shaw asked, she got off with crime. Does she have to, can she start appealing now? Yes, I'm sure they've been working on the appeal. I mean, you work on the appeal since the client, after you meet with your client. I'm already thinking about what are the issues, right? What are the potential issues on appeal? What are the issues I need to raise in trial? What are the issues I need to make the opposing counsel aware of to settle the case? Blah, 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 right? You don't just, you have to think big picture here. What is my case about? What are the weaknesses? What are the strengths? What are the potential sentences? What are the defenses? All of that. Okay. All right. Then the next question was, Hugo said, Hugo asked whether Balwani is likely to go to prison. And I say, yes, he is likely to go to prison, and he's probably going to go to prison first, right? Yatsu asked, how come she has until April to surrender? And I answered that earlier. He's afraid she's going to flee the country. Unlikely. Let's see. I answered that question. And then Mark M said, another skeptic, look, I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. Okay. I just dated myself. And I'm telling you, I put my faith in the jury system. I do. I've seen the juries do the right thing over and over and over again. Okay. And the system is not perfect by any means. And I know there's a perception to rile you all up emotionally, all this stuff about her pregnancy reducing her sentence, all this stuff to rile you up emotionally. I am focusing here on logic, and it's called Michele's analysis, not Michele's emotions. Okay. And I think we've had a little too much of our emotions being dragged around by whatever's going on out there, okay? So, we apply the law, we look at the evidence and we apply the law, all right? So, Mark said she doesn't have any intention, even 1 minute, of spending any time in prison. She will con her way right out of this 11-year sentence. And I responded back to him and I said, I doubt it. Her con got her 11 years. I think everyone's got a pretty clear picture, especially this judge, that she's not going to be remorseful. She doesn't see it. And I think many of those letters in support also, with all due respect to her, to those letters in support, I think there's a lot of people who really think, and this is part of the whole denial thing. And, I'm just my opinion here. They really think that she tried to do the right thing. Well, when you are presented with things like Tyler Schultz's scatter plots, and you can look at the video I did on, does Tyler Schultz need a tutor? Does Tyler Schultz need a math tutor? That was their response when he showed them scatter plots of the disparity of the reliability of the test results. If you have Sunny Balwani texting you and saying the lab is a effing disaster zone, can you keep representing? Can you keep making statements that it's fair and accurate, reliable? Can you keep allowing people to walk into wellness centers at Walgreens having their blood tested because they don't feel well or because their doctor told them to go get a test? They're relying on that results, and we don't know if some doctor gave the right or wrong prescription. That's when you shut the doors and you start over. You go back to the drawing board. You gather all the data and you make adjustments. That's what you do. You don't just fly with your dream. And I get it. She believed in this dream. Beliefs are not facts. And people who invest in beliefs, you can trust, but you need to verify. You need to look at the audited financials that weren't provided. There were red flags, in my opinion. But sometimes when people look at, the press that someone's getting on a product, she was labeled the Wonderkin or Silicon Valley, she was the rising star. I could see why people might want to jump on that and invest in that. Maybe. Not me. I'd be saying, where are the audited financials? I don't want your presentation of the financials. I want audited financials. Okay? But, I'm just giving my opinion here. I'm not one of these freewheeling investors. Okay? So, do you think she's going to be deterred by the sentence? All right. With overcrowding, will she get a cell with Sunny? No. Men and women are housed differently in different locations. Does Elizabeth Holmes have to do weekly court check-ins? Probably not. I'm sure she has to, whatever probation office recommends that she does, she'll probably abide by. Stargazers, it was an honest trial. Let's see. Fabrizio, have I given a look at FTX case nowadays? Yeah, I've looked at it. I looked at the complaint too. Very interesting. Very interesting. Like I said, there's a lot of a fraud going on. Take a look, you guys. Now that Elizabeth Holmes has got her sentence, you might want to start looking at the other elephants in the room. Yes, hope you continue. Okay, do you believe it's Crypto Bro has an impending lawsuit incoming? I think there's going to be a lot of people sued in that FTX case. Do you think Sunny's sentence should be the same, shorter, or longer? Bonnie Clava asked that. Do I think Sunny's sentence should be the same, shorter, or longer? Well, he was convicted of the same conspiracy count as Elizabeth Holmes. She got 11 years, and also on those 3 counts. I think the amount of loss is going to be the same. So we're going to be in the same range. If the judge just calculated it 384, right, reducing it for the fair market value. I don't know what arguments Sunny Balwani's attorneys are going to make, and I bet you that's going to be one of them. But I haven't seen the sentencing memo yet. I don't think it's filed yet. His sentencing is December 7th. So I think the sentencing memos are due like the last week in November. Corey asked, do I think prison can heal her? Well, there's a lot of people who want to reform the prison system. For that very reason, they don't think prison reforms anyone. Well, I think there's a place for prison. And will it heal her? That depends on Elizabeth Holmes. But based on what she said to the judge today, my opinion, I don't think she's done the healing. I don't think she gets it. I don't think, we all make mistakes. Maybe not to the gravity of this one, in my opinion. But, part of being an adult is admitting it and doing what needs to be done to correct it. Okay? For those of us who, live a moral and ethical life. Okay? Okay, Lynn says, do you know which prison she's going to? No, I don't. But maybe Dublin. And again, that depends on the Bureau of Prisons. They make the determination on where the prisoners go, which location. Randy Pinnock asked, investing is gambling for some high rollers. Throwing millions could be an act of faith, as much as trusting two pairs of aces. Yeah. Well, look at who the investors were. Look at who she chose as investors. She didn't choose people who were in the biomedical field. She didn't go after a similar type biomedical companies to invest. Okay. Was there deep voice during testimony? Yes. I was in Beijing program when she and Honey. Okay, voice wasn't crazy deep. Then I so wonder. Well, she claims that Sunny told her to get battle ready, or I think that was the term. That it's a man's world, and I guess she needed to lower her voice so it's more credible. I can tell you this much: people don't mess with me with this voice. That's just a joke. Okay. All right. I also thought it was interesting that she went to China. Okay. She will never heal. She's too smart to think she needs to be healed. Well, that'll be unfortunate. That'll be unfortunate for Elizabeth Holmes, because that means that she'll do it again. And that means this isn't a deterrent. I don't know. I think that, I hope, she's a young woman. She's got a lot of great skills that if she could just use those skills, marketing for one, she's brilliant at marketing. Okay. And if she could just use those skills in the right way. Okay. And I like I say, I think she's going to build the next empire. I think it's going to be a fabulous innovation, potentially. I mean, she's got the skill set to do it. And the other thing I want to point out, and I pointed this out to several reporters, was that, when Elizabeth is being indicted, what is she doing? She falls in love. Then she gets pregnant, right? She goes through the trial. Jury comes back and convicts her on 4 counts. She gets pregnant again. This woman keeps moving forward. Or maybe she's an optimist. Or maybe she just stays in the positive. Okay? I'm being very facetious here. Okay? But really, you have to look at you have to look at their actions, not just their words. All right. Thanks for my insight. You're welcome. She has no credibility left. Well, Lynn, I don't think she had any credibility when the media started covering this, and that's, no, I won't go on a tangent. I'll stay out of that. I just hope we can stop canceling each other. Really, I do. And I hope that we can also have respect for each other and to listen to all kinds of people's opinions and to stop self-censoring ourselves. And that includes the journalists and the reporters out there too. Okay, you guys are in the Constitution as well. Freedom of press, First Amendment. Free speech, First Amendment. And to answer the question I put out weeks ago, do I think a for-profit company can provide a free speech platform? Do I think a company, a business, can provide a free speech platform when it's a for-profit business? And that's a big question we have to think about. Free speech relates to what the government can do, right? The government is not allowed to censor you because they don't agree with your opinion. That's what that whole case is, where the Missouri and the Louisiana attorney generals are suing because of the censorship that has taken place, in their opinion, the censoring of misinformation and disinformation, which frankly should send chills down your spine that those words are being used. There's a reason the First Amendment includes free speech, because if we suppress dissent, we don't get all the information. We're given one story and we're supposed to stick to it. Nope, that's not the United States, and that's not what the United States was founded on. That's not what our founding fathers meant. So I hope that we can start respecting each other, even though we disagree, because that's what our founding fathers did. They argued like heck, fought like heck to come to a compromise to create the United States, to give us the Bill of Rights. And by God, we're so fortunate to have those. So respect each other, okay? That's all I'm saying. And I'm sorry if I offended anyone, but it's my free speech. It's my opinion. Yes, lots of missteps by a lot of people. Yes, thought-provoking. I've tried to be thought-provoking. Ask anybody who sat as a juror in any of my cases. Sad that she'll miss much of her children growing up. No, Doug, they're going to have visitation, They're going to have plenty of visitation, all right? So, and also, their father's available. She has looks like a very strong family support. But the other thing is, there's a lot of studies out there about what happens to children whose mothers are incarcerated. And so I hope and I pray that her family takes very good care and eye of these children. Okay. Any other questions? Did I cover them all? Let's see. Neil said, thanks, Michele, for explaining everything. You're welcome. Okay, so I don't think I have anything else. Let me see if I have any other notes here. I've kept you guys, and thanks for sticking with me. I appreciate it. Hit that like button. And if you want to do a super chat, I should have said this early on. I put a PayPal link in the description box below the video if you want to contribute to me making these videos. And it's also in the chat box too. So do you think this is going to deter? Do you think this is going to send a loud message to other people out there who invest in companies or who start companies? Do you think 11 years is going to send a strong message to other potential fraudsters out there? And, as I said, the evening of the verdict is that, fraud is no joke. And 20 years in federal prison is no joke. That's the maximum sentence on these, right? On just one count. So, what else? Any other questions? How do you like covering? How did I like covering the case? I thought it was great because I had an opportunity to engage with you guys. And, people came up to me when I was in court, and outside court and walking around the neighborhood and emailing me and all that stuff, asking me questions, sending me questions on the YouTube channel, all of it. I think it's a great way for me to supplement what the media is doing, right? And also to correct some of it. And also it's a long form, so I can, explain some of these terms that they may or may not be using correctly. Or, for instance, when they first started reporting on this case, they kept saying her maximum sentence is 20 years. Well, that's not true. it's 20 years on each count. But it's like if you read the indictment, it said it right there. But I get it. They're covering cases, it's hard to keep up, covering a lot of different news stories. But, accurate reporting is important, and providing information is important. So will there be others that I'm covering? I don't know. We'll have to see what's interesting. Will this be the last video on this case? Maybe. Corcoy asked if this is going to be the last video. I don't know. I might do one on the appeal process, although I've kind of talked to you about it already. But I suspect over the next year or so, there's going to be plenty to talk about. Plenty of stuff that's been swept under the carpet, in my opinion. Things that we need to start should be paying attention to. I could go on, but I think you guys all know my drift. Happy Thanksgiving. Yes, thank you. Does that count? Okay, please continue. Thank you, Corcoy. Hey, so if you guys have suggestions, I'm open. Send me suggestions. What do you think? What do you think I should cover? Please make sure to keep us informed on Sunny. Yeah, I probably will, because I'm going to be curious to see what their defense is going to be. I'm a legal nerd. I'm curious to see, some people like to watch sports, right? And by the way, go Arizona State. But some people like to watch sports. I like to watch, figuring out how people put cases together, what their arguments are going to be, and different ways of looking at that case. And to me, that's kind of fascinating. It's like looking at the plays, okay? So I'll be curious, but I'm sure Sunny Balwani's defense team is paying close attention to what happened in this sentencing of Elizabeth Holmes today. Okay, Elizabeth Holmes was told by a Stanford professor, yes, I know, that the technology didn't exist. I mean, really, if you think about it, one little drop of blood. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but, anyway, how could she create a new company? Well, she can create a new company because, as the government pointed out in their sentencing memo, is part of the SEC settlement that she engaged in. She was not prohibited. She's not prohibited from serving as an officer on any company. So she can start her own company. Please appreciate the platform you provide to debate. Yes, thank you, Stargazer. Yes. And here's one other thing regarding that Gabby Petito case. And I know you're here for Elizabeth Holmes, but pay attention to that case too, okay? Gabby Petito's mother, on behalf of Gabby Petito's estate, just got a settlement. Judge, because it was a stipulated settlement between Brian Laundrie's parents as administrators of Brian Laundrie's estate, the boyfriend who confessed allegedly to killing her. That stipulated settlement, it was an agreement between the parties, not, it's being reported that it's money that's going to Gabby's parents, or that it's Brian Laundrie's parents have to pay it. No, that's not true. It's between the estates. So because Gabby's parents are creditors for the costs of the funeral and burial expenses, they're a creditor of the estate. They have the right to get whatever money is in Brian's estate. And we don't know what that is yet. I might do a video on this because I have many people who follow the Gabby Petito case too. Okay, let's see what else. Any other questions? Is this a wrap? Are we done? Court cases are my Super Bowl. Yeah, that's a better way to say it. Thank you. Can Balwani's attorneys have access to all of Elizabeth Holmes' sentencing documents? Not necessarily. Her probation sentence report is confidential. I don't think they're entitled to that. As far as the sentence today, and when the judge issues a sentencing order, they're entitled to that. As far as whatever was filed with the court, meaning all of those 130 letters in support, that's public record, whatever's filed with the court, so they're entitled to that. All of the sentencing memorandums filed by the government, by the prosecutors, and by the defense, those are filed with the court, so those are public record. So everybody, including Balwani's counsel, is entitled to that. When would the appeal be? Well, as soon as the sentencing is final, she can go ahead and she can file her appeal. Would like to hear more about your First Amendment video. Did I pull it? No, I didn't pull it. It's Fauci. Go look at the video. It's called Fauci. Depositions of Fauci, Psaki, and a bunch of government officials across 13 government agencies. And the Missouri and the Louisiana Attorney General are the plaintiffs, along with several doctors, one from Stanford, one from, I think, Yale, another one from UC Irvine are also the plaintiffs. And there's a couple other plaintiffs that are suing Fauci, the NIH, the Department of Homeland Security, the FDA, several people in the White House, the Surgeon General, etc., claiming that they violated the First Amendment because they're claiming that the government, this is where the First Amendment comes in, they're claiming that the government coerced or colluded with tech platforms such as YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. They coerced and colluded with, is what the plaintiffs are alleging. Just because it's an allegation doesn't mean it's true. But if the government is proven to have done that, that's a violation of the First Amendment, because the government, whether it's federal, state, or anyone acting in a government capacity, does not have the right to censor, suppress speech. There's only certain circumstances where free speech can be suppressed or censored. If it's obscene, if it's defamatory, if it's inciting violence and imminent harm of violence, along those lines. But these doctors and the attorney generals are claiming the information around what's been going on the last couple of years. People were deplatformed. Doctors were deplatformed. Experts were deplatformed, according to the plaintiffs. Information was suppressed. If that's true, that's a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. If that's true, First Amendment, really good video. Thank you. But I don't agree with me. You don't agree with me? Good. Tell me why not. When you don't have to agree with me, but you have to provide there has to be a place where people can express their opinions. If you're a private company, or if you're a YouTube channel like mine, I have the right to suppress speech. If you're going to comment on how ugly I am, or any of that stuff, it's because I'm a private company. But if you are doing something on behalf of the government, that's where it triggers First Amendment issues. That's the difference. Okay? So if you want to have like these social, these platforms like YouTube and Twitter, etc., which can be argued, and I'm sure is going to be argued, that, especially during the time that we were in home detention, where were we able to speak? And if that they could argue that maybe this is really just a government platform. I don't know if they're going to argue that, that's using a private company. I don't know. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm saying that's a potential argument. I see them already arguing in their complaint and their allegations, right? Coerced or colluded. People have the right to say whatever they want, but there are consequences for it, right? We've seen the consequences for it. And there's certain speech that you can't do. But here's my question to you. Do you think hate speech is covered by the First Amendment? Do you think hate speech is a violation? Hate speech can be suppressed? What do you think the answer to that one is? Anybody want to guess, or did you guys all leave? All right, when you go on appeal, is it a different ball game? Your presumption of innocence is gone. It's a different standard. The appeal standard is whether or not wrong calculations were in sentencing, or whether mistakes were made on the law. Whether there was enough significant evidence to support the convictions. Yeah, Stargazer, appeal is a high hurdle for a defendant. As I said earlier, it's very difficult to win an appeal. Yes, Corke, with rights come responsibilities, right? And if we want those rights, we have the responsibility to protect them. That's what people can say. Doesn't public health officials have the right to stop false and misleading info to protect? Well, they're the government, and it's a question of, the issue is with these cases, how do you know if it's false or misleading? Who decides that? Who decides what's hate speech? That's the issue. It's who decides that. And that's why that's why the First Amendment applies to the government, right? Is because they don't want the government suppressing dissent. Yeah, who decides whether something is false or misleading? The way to deal with this is more speech, not less speech. It's more speech, so people can debate it, so people can have disagreement, so people can say, oh, you disagree with me? Well, why is that? But if you say, we're not going to talk about it, or you can't talk about it, what is democracy? Okay, I'm just trying to, I'm just putting these provoking ideas out there. Doesn't say I believe or don't believe them. I'm just putting it out there. Okay, because you got to think about this, right? There's so many cases, and I think I should do a video on this. There's so many Supreme Court cases that explain, there's certain people have a parade and you don't like what they have to say. Does the local government have a right to say you can't have a parade because they don't agree with you? Well, no, they can't, right? There can be restrictions around where you can demonstrate or have your parade, but they can't suppress the message. Can I go to high school and wear a t-shirt, or, a shirt that says something that you don't agree with? Is that okay? There's the richness in this, you guys, the richness of having differing views, that we come to understand things. But if there's only one view or disagreement is suppressed, how do you ever get the full picture? Just putting it out there. All right. Are you saying we're... Yeah. Well, you can go down those rabbit holes yourself. You do your own research. You do your research. I'm just following the evidence wherever it leads. Okay? So I think that's probably enough. I probably said enough this evening. So thanks again for all of you for joining me tonight. And please hit that like button. Share these videos. Do support my work by subscribing. Thank you for all your fabulous questions. Thank you for your support for the last 9 months, your continued support. Thank you for, yeah, I don't know about that. What is he saying? You're mixing up science with social issues. No, I'm not. I'm talking about the Constitution of the United States. Anyway, so everyone's entitled to their own opinion, whether or not we agree or disagree. Okay. That's the part we're missing, I think. And we need more of that. And we need more people saying what it is, right? Not censoring yourself. Tell us what your opinion is and why, right? Prove your case, as they say. Prove your case. All right. So thanks again, everybody. Have a nice weekend. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with all your loved ones. And that's it for me. That's a wrap. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me. Okay. Thanks for watching, everyone.